What's up, everyone? Today we are doing another edition of my Cinema Roundup. This is essentially where I just run through all of the movies that I watched in the last month. Today we're talking about February 2025, and it wasn't as big of a watching month as my January, which is good for me because it means I get to do a little bit less talking, but it was still an incredibly prosperous one. I think I watched some really incredible movies this month, and I'm excited to go through them in this video. So without further ado, let's start with the first movie I watched of the month, which was This was a rewatch for me, probably my fifth time seeing this movie, and I find myself expressing the same sentiment every single time I think about it or I watch it. I believe that this is a perfect film. That's not to say that it's my favorite movie or it's one of my top favorites. I'd place it somewhere in my top 100 favorite films of all time, but structurally and artistically, it's flawless from start to finish. I originally put it on just to check out the Criterion Blu-ray I got for Christmas, intending to just have it play in the background. But as soon as that initial scene started, Ben being bombarded with his parents' friends, all asking him what he's going to do now that he's graduated, I could not look away. This movie has such an enduring, iconic quality. It hooks me every time. And the ending, frankly, the entire final sequence is always a thrill ride and, at the same time, a gut punch. That last image never loses its impact. Claire's Knee marks my first foray into Eric Rohmer's work, and it wasn't what I expected. This film is the fifth installment in Rohmer's Six Moral Tales series, a collection of introspective narratives centered on human behavior, desire, and morality. And in true French filmmaker fashion, Claire's Knee is deeply French, filled with philosophical musings, slow burn pacing, and complex character dynamics. Watching this through the lens of 2025, I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable with the glaring age of consent-sized hole. What may have been more acceptable in France in the early 70s now feels deeply problematic. Jerome's actions, which are innocently framed as intellectual or exploratory, come off as narcissistic and manipulative and just plain creepy. Despite its unsettling premise, Claire's Knee explores intriguing themes, particularly the intersection of love, desire, and power. Jerome's philosophy of wanting to be desired before he could feel desire himself speaks to his need for control. The scene where Laura, the younger of the two women, rejects his kiss stands as a sharp reversal of his expectations and leads to the second chapter of the film effectively. The dialogue is rich, deliberate, and endlessly philosophical, delving into generational love, the validity of youthful passion, and the nature of possession in relationships. It has the flair of films to come after it, especially with the Gen X genre of films like Reality Bites, Clerks, The Day Trippers, etc., where characters go on long rants about their perspective on grand ideas like love and meaning and intimacy. And while these musings can be captivating in certain settings and under certain conditions, here they often feel like lengthy diatribes that are bogging down the film's pacing. Adding to this sluggishness is the absence of a score. While I understand the choice to let natural rhythms of dialogue and setting take center stage, the lack of music left the experience feeling somewhat hollow for me. Ultimately, this film is an intriguing one with undeniable artistic merit, but it's also a challenging watch for me. While I didn't love it, I'm curious to explore more of Rohmer's work. I put on MacGruber just for some good, clean fun to decompress from a long 2 weeks of work, and it was my first time watching it, and I was laughing constantly throughout. My favorite line is probably, "MacGruby don't play like homie, and homie don't play like that." Alright, buckle up. Shen Kaiga's Farewell My Concubine is one of the most visually stunning films I have ever seen. From the moment I watched the trailer, I knew it would be extraordinary, but the actual experience left me utterly speechless. The cinematography is impeccable, every frame feels like a masterpiece. There are countless images in this film that will stay with me forever, thanks to its masterful camera work, lighting, and vibrant, evocative production and costume design. It deserves to be discussed among the most beautiful films ever made. Beyond its visual brilliance, the story is deeply tragic and profound, exploring themes of identity, loyalty, betrayal, memory, and the inescapable influence of history. It uses the backdrop of a rapidly changing China, spanning decades from political upheaval to the Cultural Revolution, to reflect the personal struggles of its characters. This interweaving of political and personal trauma is one of the film's greatest strengths. The climactic scene in which the three main players are dragged into the town square to be humiliated by the Red Guard left me on the edge of my seat, ready for the unthinkable to happen. The betrayal on display from all sides was devastating, and I could feel the air get sucked out of my living room during this whole sequence. I could feel myself not breathing because the combined efforts of the score, the performances, the costumes, the cinematography, and everything within the narrative that led to that moment just took my breath away. As an American viewer, I found it eye-opening to witness the complexities of life in China during this period. The film itself has had a bit of a tumultuous history. It was banned in China twice and underwent edits when Miramax acquired it, and despite its critical acclaim, it remains underappreciated, which is frankly a tragedy. This is a film that should be studied and celebrated as one of the greatest achievements of 20th century cinema. The performances are nothing short of incredible, each actor delivering nuanced and unforgettable work. The interplay of realism, operatic melodrama, and vibrant visuals creates a tone that occasionally shifts, but this fluctuation feels intentional, though it bothered me at some moments. Farewell, My Concubine is a film that deserves to be talked about every day. It is haunting, beautiful, and deeply moving. For anyone who loves cinema or storytelling, this is essential viewing. I made a whole video about this, so feel free to go check that out, but essentially, this film feels like Ex Machina meets Bodies, 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 or Don't Worry, Darling, blending a slick modern aesthetic with humor and commentary on AI, free will, and toxic entitlement. The first half leans into Her-esque exploration of human-robot relationships with a complex and romantic dynamic between the leads, but as the film shifts into its third act, it trades its subtlety, which, to be fair, there isn't much of, for heavy-handedness. Josh is portrayed as a caricature of toxic masculinity and entitlement. He delivers over-the-top rants about what he deserves that feel more like Reddit threads come to life than nuanced character study. The lack of depth here, for me, undermines what could have been a more layered exploration of incel culture and the darker side of modern gender dynamics. Despite that, Companion does have its strengths. The humor mostly lands in the supporting cast, particularly Lucas Gage and Harvey Guillén are great. The film's themes of control and autonomy are timely, though its execution feels more conventional than groundbreaking. It's an entertaining watch, but it never pushes the genre's boundaries. I think I walked away thinking this was a very safe movie. I already made a video about this, so feel free to check that out, but this is kind of like that meme of the drawing of the horse that just gets uglier and uglier as it goes on. I'm not sure if Sam Wilson has a character arc in this movie. I think he's just the same dude at the end as he is at the beginning. Also, the foil to the leader's master plan was just human unpredictability or just Sam Wilson being himself. And I don't know, man. The action has its moments, and Carl Lumbly as Isaiah Bradley stole the show for me. The cast is doing what they can with what they're given, but this movie is safe, riskless, and flat out clunky. This movie is, quite frankly, my jam. It has everything I want from a 90s romantic comedy drama, an incredible soundtrack, music by The Replacement's Paul Westerberg, Matt Dillon with long hair, Mudhoney t-shirts, Alice in Chains, cameos from Eddie Vedder, Chris Cornell, and Tim Burton, of all people, a goofy Jeremy Piven thrown in for good measure, and characters who are aimless yet oddly proud of it, philosophizing about life, love, and the pursuit of nothing in particular. The film feels like a spiritual sibling to other Gen X classics like Reality Bites, Slacker, Clerks, Suburbia, or The Day Trippers. These films were so lovable for their ability to capture the same zeitgeist of disaffected, world-weary 20-somethings navigating love and life with equal parts cynicism and idealism. I get that this kind of filmmaking doesn't work for everyone. It's been out of fashion for a while, maybe because we've all become those cynical, world-weary 20-somethings ourselves, and it's unsettling, or maybe just annoying, to see that reflected back to us. But I'll be honest, I miss when films were this uniquely cynical, yet hopeful, about relationships and the world. To quote Brian De Palma, "Holy mackerel." This felt like essential viewing for any folks who want to be a filmmaker, in the sense that De Palma is a legend and is very open and candid about the difficulties of working within an industry and a system. Having seen maybe only a quarter of the films discussed in this film, I'm excited to dig deep into his entire filmography. I do kind of wish on a formal level this film was a bit more kinetic and energetic to maybe mirror the kinetic and energetic nature of De Palma's films. The idea of one long interview with the man of the hour is cool in theory, but about halfway through I was itching for some other perspectives or anecdotes from some people in his sphere at the time, or at the very least some more cultural context regarding the controversial nature of his films. Like, I wanted to see what others were thinking at the time instead of Brian De Palma just going, "People loved it, it was a big hit." Later that night, after watching the De Palma documentary, I watched Phantom of the Paradise, and this is such a wild, surreal rock opera, and it completely lived up to the years of hype that I had built up for it. Brian De Palma's style, split screens, over-the-top performances, and crazy visual choices just fits this weird little world so well. It's a movie where people make deals with the devil and characters act totally unhinged, but it all feels right because everything about the world is off-kilter. The production design, costumes, and especially the music pull you in completely. Any strange acting choices or bizarre decisions a character makes feel like they belong, unlike some of De Palma's other films where the oddness stands out in a bad way. This time, the weirdness is a feature, not a bug. And speaking of the music, I loved it. The second the movie ended, I added the soundtrack to my playlist, and I know I'll be listening to it a lot. It's just so good. What surprised me most is how well De Palma handles the whole rock opera vibe. I never thought of him as someone who'd be in touch with that kind of thing. He always seemed more like a Hitchcock-obsessed sleazeball to me, but he nailed it here. The performances are all amazing in this heightened, surreal way. Paul Williams as Swan was especially great, so slimy and menacing, and Winslow's whole phantom storyline is just the perfect mix of tragic and chaotic. If I had any complaints, it's that I wanted more. The movie is under 90 minutes, and I could have easily watched another half hour of the Phantom sabotaging Swan's plans. The ending felt a bit rushed too. Once we found out Swan's backstory and his whole deal, it wraps up a little too quickly. I wish it had taken more time to build the tension in the finale. I have to say, I absolutely love this. I've always enjoyed movies about making movies, and this might be the most movie about movies movie I have ever seen. It's a blend of noir detective story mixed with the cynical humor of something like Entourage, a fascinating self-aware look at the Hollywood machine. From the opening moments, I was hooked. The long tracking shot that kicks off this film is incredible. The meta way that characters pitch movie ideas, breaking the fourth wall without quite breaking it, felt really refreshing. The player doesn't shy away from name-dropping real people or filling the screen with a murderer's row of cameos. There's something bold and unashamed about the way it portrays Hollywood's creative bankruptcy and its obsession with adhering to superficial standards. I found it to be both a satire and a celebration of the very industry that it's critiquing. Tim Robbins as Griffin Mill is the perfect slimy protagonist, a paranoid, self-serving movie executive who makes everything worse by taking matters into his own hands and killing the wrong guy. And sure, the movie meanders a bit, but even that feels like a deliberate commentary on Hollywood's storytelling formula. One standout moment is when Griffin lists these superficial elements that make a movie marketable, like sex, nudity, violence, suspense, and how the player itself slyly includes all of those, but in clever, understated ways. As with many of Robert Altman's films, I love the overlapping dialogue and layered sound design. You have to pay attention to multiple conversations at once, which makes the world feel alive and chaotic. It's the kind of movie that rewards repeat viewings, not because of its hidden plot twists, but because of its rich and textured details. Overall, I really enjoyed this, and I cannot wait to explore more of Robert Altman's filmography. Good lord, this film is pure, unfiltered chaos in the best possible way. Once the gremlins start multiplying, the movie hits full throttle and just never lets up, delivering a mile-a-minute spectacle that's equal parts absurd, inventive, and hilarious. This feels like Joe Dante Unleashed, a film where the director had total creative freedom, and it shows. The movie is a live-action Looney Tunes cartoon packed with wild gags, fourth wall-breaking moments. The burning film strip and Hulk Hogan cameo are unforgettable, and the endless parade of bizarre, delightful gremlins. The Phantom of the Opera gremlin, the horny, clingy girlfriend gremlin, the spider gremlin, the flasher gremlin, the electric gremlin, the Sinatra singing gremlin, and of course, Gizmo going full John Rambo. The world building is phenomenal, crammed with callbacks, setups, and blink and you'll miss it jokes that reward repeat viewings, like the broken revolving door. It's Joe Dante's love letter to cinema itself, brimming with movie references like "I'm melting, what a world," and meta humor like the gremlin getting a Warner Brothers tattoo. Joe Dante's career has always fascinated me, with childhood classics like Explorers and Small Soldiers alongside cult gems like The Howling and Piranha. Gremlins 2 really feels like it exemplifies his risk-taking creativity, blending slapstick and satire to make a film that's as much for adults as it is for kids. Like Jacques Tati's Playtime, there's so much happening in the background while the foreground keeps you entertained, making it endlessly rewatchable, and I cannot believe I didn't watch this sooner. So I'm not gonna lie, I found this very enjoyable. At first it was like that Taylor Swift music video where the guy and girl are neighbors and they're writing notes to each other, and then it was like Annihilation. I stopped counting after a bit, but there are so many set pieces, fights, action scenes in this. To quote Brian De Palma in the De Palma documentary, "Holy mackerel." This film started to feel like it was designed to be a video game instead of a movie, with just the sheer number of boss levels that it had, with a few romantic cutscenes sprinkled throughout. But yeah, this was cute. There was some good chemistry between Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. I loved seeing them trade off and fight together. They really seemed like they were meant to be together, like Mr. and Mrs. Gorge. But I have to say there was a little too much explaining, in my opinion. Like, I wish Scott Derrickson had left a little bit of mystery. I was happy knowing little to nothing about the Hollow Men, and I kind of thought it should have stayed that way. It was nice to see a straight-to-streaming movie take some creative risks, but of course not too many risks, just enough to make it stand out from the crowd. But also, I kind of think this movie would have gone hard in a theater. The Monkey is a strange, quotable homage to 80s horror. Think Creepshow, Graveyard Shift, or Night of the Comet. Or think of it as a mixture of Final Destination and that Goosebumps story, Say Cheese and Die. Osgood Perkins leans heavily into deadpan camp and black humor, crafting a film that's more gore-driven comedy than traditional horror. The deaths in this movie are mostly played for laughs, and the oddball dialogue really stood out to me. Lines of dialogue like, "We'll do our best, but you should know that our best might be bad," feel central to the film's design, making the dialogue as memorable as the kills. Like Perkins' last film, Longlegs, this film struggles to build momentum. It plateaus pretty early and sticks to one tone, but still, it's brimming with fascinating ideas about death's inevitability and how we deal with it. I found that the film was alluding to the idea that the titular monkey isn't evil, it's just a tool. The true chaos comes from those who turn the key. Perkins captures the vibe of campy, black comedy horror classics like Gremlins and Silver Bullet, while exploring themes of chaos and inevitability. This movie won't be for everyone, but for fans of strange, offbeat horror comedies, it feels confident, quotable, and totally unique. I just wish Perkins didn't have such an ending problem. Between this and Longlegs, his climactic sequences have been a bit of a letdown. And that'll do it for my cinema roundup of February 2025. What did you watch this month? What was your favorite thing that you watched in February? Let me know down in the comments. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell to be notified when new videos come out on the channel, and I will see you all next time.